Here's the entire recap of Undead Unluck Season 1 that you should watch before Season 2. Welcome to Anime Donut, your #1 source for anime and manga news and videos. Episode 1, Undead Unluck. Just when Fuko read the end of her favorite manga, she was also ready to end her life because she knew well she'd never experienced the same passionate romance in real life due to her condition where everyone she touches suffers a misfortune. But just before she jumps at the bridge above the train tracks, a man calls her attention and mocked everything she said. Then makes physical contact with her, which causes him to fall off the bridge out of nowhere. Fuko thought he already died until his head came flying back and saw his entire body regenerate. Ends up, the man was actually an immortal who's been looking for ways to end his life, which is why Fuko caught his interest. As they start to get along, a group of men belonging to an organization suddenly interrupts to capture them in order to take advantage of their abilities. Therefore, their supposed captures failed. When they successfully got out of trouble, they finally agreed to team up. Fuko then names the immortal man, who calls himself Undead, Andy. Episode 2, Union. Since Andy found out the trick behind Fuko's biggest unluck so far, which technically still didn't work for him, he suggested something more intense, something that Fuko highly disagreed with. Fuko thinks of an excuse and Andy surprisingly buys it. Until then, Andy swore to protect her until that day came. To start, Andy brought her to his armory and packed up everything they could bring, since he was already anticipating another attack from the strange man they just encountered. Andy then explained that they once successfully captured him 50 years ago and experimented on him in a laboratory. As the duo were traveling, an attack indeed came again from the strange men whom Andy referred to as the Union. Unlike the several men they had encountered previously, this time around there were only two, and both of them were negators, just like Fuko and Andy. When Fuko asked why they were not being chased like themselves, Shin, the blue-haired man, explained how the Union works, which is it's basically a system of to hunt or be hunted, where there are only 10 slots for the hunters, and vacancy is only going to be open if a member dies. When Andy was able to take down the unavoidable negator, one slot was opened. However, the duo needed two. Since they couldn't finish off Shin, the blue-haired man gave them a tip on how and where they could manage to gain another slot before leaving. Episode 3, How to Use My Unluck. A flashback showed a glimpse of Andy's life when he was captured 50 years ago. And going back to the present, the Union continues to chase them even in the waters until a way bigger explosive destroys their yacht. Andy rushes to save Fuko when she gets stuck under some parts of the boat that sank. When she finally gains consciousness and realizes that they're still under attack, Andy comes up with an idea for how to use Fuko's unlock to their advantage, which eventually worked as it literally provided them with a new and faster form of transportation to Russia. When they arrived at Lake Baikal, the duo separated paths for a while, and Fuko happened to bump into another Japanese person in a foreign country. Little did she know that it was the negator who just recently sent the huge explosive that blew up their yacht, and the one that Andy had told her about that was a bad match for him. They even bonded through painting together, until she suddenly revealed her identity to Fuko as the lady who can create invisible barriers. Fortunately, Andy appeared just in time. Episode 4, Do You Love the Change in Me? When the lady whom Andy referred to as Gina saw him, she immediately reminisced how she captured and fell for him 50 years ago, and nagged about how he left without a word 10 years later. Despite that, all the while Andy is trying to find a way to counter her negation. She never let her guard down and even managed to inflict more damage on Andy compared to the other way around, regardless of the tools he used. Until finally he figured it out. He painted the air red with his own blood to turn the invisible negations into visible. With Fuko stuck on his back to keep her negation powers under his disposal, jealousy built up for Gina, considering how much skinship the duo was involved in. The longer the battle went on, the more desperate her attacks became, and eventually the duo was able to crack down the code on how to counter Gina's negation. Andy was about to finish her off, but he didn't, saying that she didn't have much time anyway. A few moments before her death, Gina finally realizes how change is not exactly bad, and just before she takes her last breath, Andy holds her hand and kisses her goodbye. So if you also want to have an ending like her, make sure you like, share, and subscribe. Episode 5, United We Negate. Fuko mourned Gina's death, and Andy comforted her, saying Gina had somewhat expressed wanting to die even way before, so she only owed Fuko her peace. Now that there are 2 vacancies in the union, the duo agrees to try to change it so no one else would have to suffer as Gina did. Just when they were about to have a toast, someone from the union literally picked them up. Andy made their entrance a little grand by pulling some tricks, and then finally, they got to meet the members of the union. For the second time, Fuko and Andy's toast was interrupted when one of the members suddenly hit Andy right in the face after killing Gina. Andy countered, but they were immediately stopped by Juiz, the number 1 in the union. When everyone settled down and sat in their respective seats, their quests and quotas were unveiled. However, Fuko disagreed with parts of it, to which Juiz explains to her that if she wants to turn the tables, she has to beat her from being the number 1 by having the most accomplishments. Hearing that, Andy grabs Apocalypse, the oldest artifact responsible for unveiling the union's tasks, and asks what is the hardest quest among all the mentioned. Without letting Apocalypse finish, Andy points to Fuko and Shin as the ones who will accompany him to carry out the said mission. The 3 of them were just getting ready to go when an unidentified mysterious animal, or a UMA, suddenly broke loose. With a sudden turn of events due to Fuko's stroke of unluck, instead of containing the UMA back to its cell, it became their servant. Specifically, Andy's clothes. Episode 6, Spoil. Andy initially told Shin that he'd be leaving all the mission to him so he could take Fuko out on a date. True to his words, he drove a truck headed to America with just Fuko as the passenger. However, Shin suddenly made an appearance with his feet plastered on the top of the vehicle, making Andy snort. When Shin plays the audio of the last intel they got about their target, Fuko shivers in fear, while he taunts their driver about how Andy won't be able to fight half-heartedly this time around. When evening came and they stopped traveling to rest, Shin asked Fuko why she wanted to do the mission, to which she answered that she wanted to win the prize, which is Unrepair's whereabouts. Thinking Unrepair might be able to help with Andy's wish of ridding his immortality. When they finally reached the entrance of Longing, the supposed location of their mission, Shin tried to leave a precaution when Andy suddenly blew up its barricades, letting all the zombies out. Andy drives the truck head on, hitting all the zombies in their way. When he got inside the town, Andy painted the town red with his blood. After the bloodbath, he found a girl who wasn't a complete zombie yet. Just when they were about to advance to their next step, Andy found a timer on his abdomen. After the timer ended, his hands started to rot. He tried to regenerate it, but it just rots back. Andy went away with the girl he found to do a pretend marriage to fulfill her dream after asking permission from Fuko. When Shin was shouting to stop him, Fuko spotted a kid and followed him. For that, Shin also followed them to the underground. The kid stood in front of the other kids as if he was protecting them, pointing a gun at the negators when he realized that some adults were following him. It didn't last long until Fuko and Shin noticed that the numbers on the kid's abdomen had more digits than Andy's. Back to the pretend wedding, Andy slashes the statue that stood between him and his zombie wife. The UMA they've been looking for reveals itself. Andy calls the attention of all the other zombies around by hitting the UMA with a bell. By then, a battle commences. Episode 7, Dream. Fuko asks the kid who pointed a gun at them what happened in their town, and how were they still alright despite the chaos. A flashback then shows how a strange eye suddenly appeared out of nowhere and started speaking, then engulfing the town with smoke that turned the people into zombies. The kid's teacher led them to the underground tunnel to go hiding just before she turned into a zombie herself. Back to the present, the kid also tells them how to raise the numbers on their abdomen. A loud thud was then heard to the underground, so Shin and Fuko assumed that it was Andy. When they went out to see what was happening, Fuko was surprised to see Andy and the zombies working together to defeat the final boss. They also find out that Andy's pretend bride was actually the teacher who kept the kids safe. When Andy told all the zombies to touch Fuko so they could use her power to cause damage to the UMA, it was the zombified teacher who hugged her first. The teacher then runs to the UMA, it picks her up and explodes with it. However, the UMA still managed to survive. Fuko started touching all the zombies while Shin put the kids back in the underground tunnel. The UMA suddenly started inhaling all the zombies to access its final form. It doesn't just spoil everything it touches anymore, it instantly disintegrates. Andy tried to go head on without physical contact, but he already started to spoil, including his clothes, even without touching the UMA. It started explaining why it's been wreaking havoc, but Fuko stood firm on why she disagrees with it. Her timer then skyrockets, as well as Shin's when he talked about his dreams, much to the UMA's surprise. Episode 8, Undead Unluck. Shin figures out the UMA's weakness and takes advantage of it. The UMA gets frustrated because it can't grasp why it can't counter Shin at will. Shin then gets hyped up, saying that he might just be able to see that man thanks to the UMA's overwhelming power. Andy is about to help when the ground suddenly breaks apart and he falls in. Fuko then suggests how they could end the UMA in space, but thought it to be impossible. However, Shin thinks otherwise. He makes a proposal to Andy that could make Fuko's suggestion happen, to which Andy agrees. For the second time, Andy took the card out of his head to go all out. His regeneration speed skyrocketed, and his hair turned black. Andy easily takes out the UMA's core. However, when he gets back to Earth, black-haired Andy suddenly asks for the month and year. All of a sudden, a current flowed on his scar, where he typically puts the card, and started talking to himself. Shin then addresses him as Victory Victor, the man that Shin had been wanting to see. Shin gets knocked out after a brawl fight with Victor despite activating his ability, so Fuko tried to touch him, hoping for her unluck to work, but it didn't. Shin got up and hit Victor with his last ounce of strength to protect Fuko as promised, and just in time, the rest of the Union suddenly appeared for backup. And that's it for Undead Unluck Recap episodes 1 through 8. If you enjoyed this content, please be sure to like and subscribe as it really helps out our channel. That's it for this one, guys. Anime Donut, rolling out.